Thanks for that. So, timings wise, we're going to aim to finish at 5 to 3, and then you're hopefully all aware that we're moving on to a second session because we had about 12, 14 people wanted to attend. Some of them were very much on the survey, the customer experience survey side specific. So we decided to divide it up. This session is going to focus more on the data, all the other elements apart from the customer experience survey, and then we'll finish at 2:55, have a 5-minute comfort break. And then I think a couple of you said that you would like to join for the customer experience survey, which will run from 3 for again 55 minutes. Just to sort of position, I'm going to ask everyone just to do a quick introduction of themselves so you're all aware of the breadth of positions, roles, responsibilities that we've got here today. But the background to this is very much that the moving communities is a moving feast, if you excuse the pun. It's had to be set up, very quickly. It's had to change and adapt on the move. It's now been up and running for what, 3 months. Most of the elements that we intend to implement have been carried out in some form or another. So we just thought it's a really good opportunity to take a bit of a breath, stand back now. We did the client feedback survey. We had about 65, 70 responses, roughly split 40-60 between local authorities and operators. So we've got a really good feel for what's working relatively well and what's not working so well in terms of the service that's being provided. But I think what's very clear to me is that moving communities in some form or another is here to stay. So it's really important that we get people's feedback after this 2 or 3 month stage and see what we can do to improve it. So I guess the 3 things that we're going to be looking at today are going to be, first of all, the ease of setting up and submitting data to the platform. Secondly, understanding the current usefulness that you feel that you're getting from the dashboard, from reports, through insights, infographics. And then thirdly, it's moving on to futures. How can we make it more valuable and beneficial to you guys going forward? So we're only going to have about 15 minutes on each of those and then leave 5 minutes just to tie things up at the end. As I said, Sport England, 4 Global, Sheffield Hallam and Max Associates all agreed that they thought it'd be better if they didn't come on to this call because this is very much a listening exercise. So if you do have any specific questions, complaints or queries, this isn't really the session for us to provide answers because we're in listening mode. But what we'll do is Ali is happy to take notes of anything, and then we can direct it to Sport England, 4 Global, or ourselves, and we'll come back to you directly with any sort of specific queries. Final point before I ask you to introduce yourself is that we've got 7 people on. So I think we'll try and manage, if people are happy to keep unmuted and come in without raising hands, we'll give that a go. But if you're struggling to get my attention, give me a physical wave of the hand, or if that doesn't work, then do the virtual wave of the hand, because I'm really going to try and make sure that everyone has a good say across all of the elements. So I think the only reason I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself is that I think it's quite good for everyone to know that we've got there's some representatives from larger operators here, from smaller operators, trusts, and I think we've also got 1 or 2 local authorities as well. So is everyone okay if we just do a very quick introduction of name, job title, and perhaps just say what your role has been, your interaction with moving communities? So I'm going to start off with Jane. Do you mind kicking things off?
As if I would. Hi, I'm Jane Parish. I'm the CEO of Sensio Community Leisure, which is based in Sevenoaks. From my point of view, I've actually been, because we're quite a small trust and I still have nearly 80 staff on flexible furlough, myself and our finance manager have virtually done the whole thing in relation to the moving communities. And Ali and I have been in quite regular contact, haven't we, Ali, in terms of some of the problems and issues that, we've been dealing with. So, yeah.
Lovely. Thanks, Jane. Sharon, do you mind going next?
Yeah, I'm Sharon Keane from Wychavon Leisure, which is a small trust operator in Wychavon, Worcestershire. Same moving communities. It's been myself that's been on track with that, along with Andrew from financial side. He hasn't inputted any of the data yet due to time constraints, but he will do so in the future. And yeah, I've had various conversations via email with Ali, and she's been very helpful.
Brilliant. That's good feedback. You'll make a note of that, won't you, Ali? David, over to you.
So I'm David, I'm head of IT for Everyone Active. So we've got about 60 clients that we look after. So we've got a large input into this, I suppose. And yeah, that's me. So I'd be managing the sort of like the data input, and I coordinated all the surveys and all that sort of stuff.
Excellent. Thanks, David, and pleased to meet you. Andy?
Yep, so Andy Glover, Head of Customer Experience for Places Leisure, so similar to David. So we've got 36 clients. Our workload sort of for moving communities, I tend to be surveys, distribution with the marketing team, all the privacy policy, and then head of our IT, which is Phil White, who can't be on the call, is probably taking David's role there at liaising on all of the data input. So I'm part Phil today, but most of my interest is probably in the next session. But it's yeah.
Brilliant. Thanks, Andy. Appreciate you coming on for this first session. Colin?
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Colin Smythe. I'm a development manager for GLL. We have a similar number of sites to David and Andy. My role has been kind of helping coordinate it internally and try to manage it a bit more centrally, as opposed to kind of all the sites having to deal individually with clients.
Brilliant. Thanks, Colin. I'm pleased to meet you. Lisa?
Hi, my name's Lisa Bowes. I'm business manager at Sheffield City Council, and we got trust that comes under us that report onto the database, but they feed it in through us, and we've also got Places Leisure that do deliver some of our sessions across the city as well. So coming at from a trust perspective and a council perspective as well.
Excellent. It's good to have you there with your two hats on, probably three in a way, isn't it?
Yeah, good to meet you, Lisa.
Yeah. Yes, yeah. Lisa meet Andy, Andy meet Lisa. Right, Richard.
Hi everyone, my name is Richard Bruce. I'm the Business Development Manager for Halo Leisure. I got involved in the early parts with the bid writing in terms of the applications, and haven't been able to offload it to anyone else. So at some point it was decided I was the best person to help collate the information. So yeah. Still looking for someone to offload to, but it's going to be me for a while. So I coordinate getting the various data together and then making sure it's uploaded.
Lovely. Thanks, Richard. Your sound is a little bit dodgy. It's I don't know if you can get a little bit closer. It tends to sort of come and go a little bit. But yeah, great, thanks. Okay, right, conscious of making the most use of time. So let's go straight into it. So the first section I want to spend a bit of time on is how you found the overall, let's open this up. So it's the setup, initial organization, communication, and ease of submitting data to the platform. Would anyone like to start off just with a couple of minutes of your general feedback about that? Who would like to go first?
Yeah,
go on, Andy, please.
So I think data setup is probably more one for Phil in my team, but I think communications, and I guess this probably is partly due to the speed, but obviously we put our hand up and said that we would do this for clients, which is obviously the right thing, and we have access to all of the data. You can't expect 36 clients to pull the data off our databases. But what was probably most apparent is that by communicating to the clients first, we were last in the queue. So in that world, that means 30 of our clients going to my contract managers, 30 of them emailing me. So there were some days where I'd get 30 emails asking me the same questions. And also because you'd communicated to the clients, it doesn't necessarily respect the workload that's in there at my end. So as a very big business with 36 clients, I've got to get sort of privacy policy signed off. I've got to build an audience list for the customer. I've got to get the email branded and what have you. Now that is probably a sort of, it can be between a 5 and 10 day period realistically, because of the first moving communities. It was right in the middle of one of the reopenings. So everyone's pushing back on me saying, Andy, we can do this, but it takes some time. But obviously because you'd gone to the client first, there wasn't a chance for us to say, hang on a sec, if you could tell us first and then build in that sort of SLA, then probably the client gets a better experience because they know that actually it would take us 15 days. Well, let's communicate with them once it's ready to go. But everyone's got different systems, and I suspect whether you're small or large, it all depends on workload is probably a tougher challenge for the smaller trusts, but equally bureaucracy and internal SLAs is a biggie for me. There's just, you know, I don't have teams that just suddenly turn things around for me in 10 minutes. It's just not how it works. So.
Yeah. Okay, brilliant. Thanks, Andy. Who'd like to build on that next? Sharon, and then I'll come to you, David.
Yeah, I was just going to say, from a small trust point of view, communication at first wasn't actually coming out to us, and we struggled with that. It was going to the local authority, and they were chasing us up where we were with everything, and we were trying to say we can't even get on the systems and things like that. But once I got hold of Ali's email, and that they were coming straight back, and I got it resolved quite quickly. So from that point of view, it came at a very busy time. I don't think the system was quite ready and kept crashing as well. So that didn't sort of help with those initial things. But I think it was just timing. And I can understand that, because you were trying to get it all going, and everybody was under pressure at that time.
Brilliant. Thanks, Sharon. David, did you want to say something?
I was just going to concur with what Andy was saying about the comms going to the clients, and as not being part of that comms initially. That was very difficult for us, because I was getting lots of contract managers coming to me saying, what's happening with this, babble, babble, babble. And I think that settled down after a while, but that was initially quite a difficult thing. I think we were using 4Global before, so we were already uploading a load of data up to 4Global. There was a bit of faffing around, and as having to understand the different categories that you were using and that sort of stuff, so that we could reconcile the data and that kind of thing. So I think one of the key things for me going forward is going to be definitions of data as well, about what it is that we're doing. So when you're recording attendance, for example, this might be a different section actually, but when you're recording attendance, for example, what do we mean by attendance? Because one of the issues we had was, once the data did start going out to clients, then they were getting different data from 4Global via moving communities to what we were sending them in terms of their attendance data. So the two weren't marrying up. And that was purely because of definitions and the way we're doing it. It wasn't the data was incorrect. It was just that we were sending one thing, and moving community was representing data in a different way. So I think as an industry, we're going to have to come together and agree some standard definitions about what various things are. So the attendance data was fine, getting that loaded up, and then it was getting all the finance data up and everything later on when that started to become available. But 4Global were very good, I have to say, and they worked with us so that we could load all that up from spreadsheets and stuff to save them to tap it all in. So, you know, good credit to Kerr and his team there for getting that sorted for us. So eventually that worked well, I think. So yeah, and the other thing I suppose was access, which I don't know if that's this section, where we're going to come on to that later. That might be later when we talk about the dashboard and stuff, how we give people access to it. I'll mention that later.
Brilliant. Thanks, David. Jane, do you want to go next?
Thank you. I mean, I think I confer with everything that people said, especially from Sharon's point of view in relation to communication, because that was the major issue for us. And certainly I wasn't getting the information in relation to when timescales had to be adhered to, especially putting in past data. We actually signed up to become part of Data Hub and 4Global, and it's all gone completely pear-shaped, which caused me major problems initially, because it was showing on the platform the thumb up for Data Hub, but no data was in it. So they had to then go and take it all out, and I had to go re-input manually the whole lot from 2019, which Ali very nicely extended the deadline for me, because the local authority had also not given me the deadlines. So we were really under the cosh that we weren't hitting the deadlines for the April data, which was an absolute nightmare. So from that point of view, you know, I confirm them, it is difficult when you're dealing directly with your local authority, and it's only as good as then as the information or stuff that they're getting back to you.
Yeah.
So that was particularly difficult for us. I think obviously we've all said the timing was quite rushed. So again, when we were going on it, I couldn't access half the stuff on the platform. It wasn't there. Everything. You expect teething problems, but then you start losing confidence, and you think, blimey, am I doing something wrong? Am I not doing this, not doing that?
Yeah.
So that was a little bit off-putting, but we persevered and we eventually got there, didn't we?
Yeah. Brilliant.
Yeah,
Right.
I have to say on that, it's probably the same as David, having a relationship with 4Global was a godsend for us. But I mean, and that's going back years. But without that, I think, I don't imagine what it's like, but I think I would have had quite a different experience, and I'm sure Phil would have done as well. So we were grateful for that. And obviously, most of our stuff seemed to be smooth. There was only a couple of sections that we needed to input manually, which was good, but that's a very different kettle of fish from others, I think.
Yeah. Okay. Colin, anything to add at all?
No, I think, I guess for us, the communication was a big bit. I mean, it was almost like we were always on the back foot. I was like, David and Andy getting emails from sort of contract managers saying, what are you doing for this? And I'm saying, well, that's the first I've heard of it. So if we were kind of had that sort of 2, 3, 4 days in advance, whatever it is, I'd have an answer. And after that, I could email out to our contract managers saying, this is what's coming up.
Yeah.
And this is what you need to tell your clients. I think there is teething problems. So I don't want to sort of go on about the teething problems. But one thing we've kind of, again, I mean, I just echo what 4Global was brilliant. I mean, they really thought with us, and helped us with the participation and finance. One thing when the portal first went up there, not all our centres were on there. So we spent quite a lot of time with 4Global making sure the right centres were on there. Yeah. And then I guess when the survey links came through, they didn't match up what we just spent ages with the centres doing. So we didn't have some centres included, some centres that are on there, shouldn't have been in there. So I guess internally, it's kind of that communication to make sure sort of, there's only kind of, everyone knows what's on the portal and should be sent through. So I think sort of they were the major bits. And I think also there was some instances, particularly with the customer survey some of the things that went out. So I think an email went out about 100 survey responses. And I think the tone of it gave a lot of clients the opinion that it was a contractual thing to do.
Right.
And we got absolutely kind of clobbered by some clients saying, what are you doing, what are you doing?
Yeah.
When in fact, we're trying to explain that, well, it just depends how big the number of members in that centres are. We had some centres with very few members comparatively. And so we're never perhaps going to get up to 100 responses on a percentage basis. But clients didn't see that. They just thought, right, we need to get 100. Why aren't you getting 100? So I think sort of sometimes the tone and sort of what's been across the clients needs to be considered carefully. Otherwise, sort of, there's implications.
Yeah. No,
we definitely got the worst of that. And I suppose because of the timing, we've got various clients, most of which, to be fair, are really helping us at the current time. But obviously, there's lots of legal discussions and finance discussions going on at this particular time, and probably still ongoing. But if you've got someone that wants to give you a bit of a rap over the knuckles, an email such as the one that was sent is a very good reason to forward it on with, guys, this isn't, I got one from a client, this isn't good enough. And it's like, hang on a sec, if you piece this together from my end, which is obviously we have quite a big customer survey, we take the decision for privacy rules not to duplicate and send the same, our own survey and your own. So we split the base in half. We were very fair. We then have various privacy rules that say that the moving communities one goes to people that are opted in. That's our take on it. People might have a different take, but all of that decreases the funnel. As Colin says, once you then get to a smaller site, you do those two things to decrease the funnel, and it's a smaller site. If you get 30 or 40, you're doing a pretty incredible job. But I know the sort of the gist of it was the more the better, but that definitely for a couple of clients came through as quite pointed as to and we were saying, look, if you read what you're looking at, it's actually quite good. We had a good news story there, but it was completely overshadowed by sample. So and there is a science to that. That's we all know that it's you don't get 100% response rate, and equally you don't always send it to 100% of members. So
okay, all right, Lisa, over to you.
Just from me, I mean, one of the things, again, is going back on the communication side of things. We struggled. It was going to the wrong people in our, not the wrong people, that's probably the wrong word, but the people too high up, if you want, that weren't going to do the doing. And by the time they then got round to sorting out their emails and prioritising that, I'd got like a deadline of, like you say, a couple of days to turn things round, which was quite difficult. And we had conversations over that, and then it turned that we were, you know, speaking to the wrong people. But again, speaking to Ali and Sarah, it was sorted really quickly. So I appreciate that, Ali. And once we've got that sorted out, I've found it really, really easy to get things uploaded and things like that. I did have an issue with the first day, but it turned out to be something that the client our side was doing and feeding it back. But again, Ali and Sarah helped me sort it out and get it sorted out. So overall, it's not been too bad, other than like what seems to be the general is just communication and making sure that it's in the right format and making sure it's to the right people.
Yeah.
And then once that was sorted, we were being fine going forward.
Okay, brilliant, Lisa. And just to finish off, Richard.
With most of the stuff, so I won't repeat it again. The upload we found really easy. We haven't found too difficult. Getting links from local authorities was a challenge, but when it obviously just because it went to them first. The only observation I would have, combining the staffing hours and the finance data in the
Richard,
same
sorry,
spreadsheets, they are kind
comply
of
without your
different
camera.
business,
It's still coming through very
therefore
slowly.
kind of
That's
pulled
it.
together for each centre, so that's a bit of a challenge, but otherwise the auto upload for us worked very well.
Excellent. Yeah, I think you're probably better
Is
off
that
without your
working
camera,
better?
Richard.
Okay.
Yes, thanks. Okay, all right. So I guess the key things that came out of that were obviously communications, going to the right people at the right time, could definitely have been improved. Overall, some initial problems with data, the initial data submission, but those people that already had the relationship with 4Global, it was a lot smoother, and the service from 4Global seems to have been pretty good as well. Okay, so does anyone else want to, and I don't want to spend too much time looking backwards, but has anyone else got anything, before we move on from ease of submitting data to the platform, to the current situation, does anyone want to add anything on that initial setup phase? No. Okay, brilliant. So let's then move on to where we are now. And I'd like to think about the different elements of moving community. So if you think we've got the dashboard that you can just go in and see your immediate data, you've got the report writing or report creation facility that you can do using the filters. And then thirdly, we've got the insights and the infographics, which we're producing weekly and bi-weekly. So I'd like to understand who's been involved or used any of those elements and how useful you feel they've been. So if we perhaps start off with using the dashboard and creating reports on the site. Does anyone like to share any experience in, well, anyone done that? Let's ask that question. Quick show of hands, who's gone in there and done it, looked at the dashboard? Okay, excellent. Sharon, do you want to kick off? How have you found using the dashboard and generating your reports on it?
Yeah, it's simple enough for us. Obviously, we're small, so we've got nobody uploading the data, so we don't have a lot of shared data. But for reports that to see how well we've performed, I've taken it to board meetings and I've put it out on our social media feeds and news because they were good points to make out to everybody. So that's what I found useful. We don't get a lot of data, as I said. Andrew, our finance guy, hasn't had a chance to put the financials on yet. I've only put the user data on, but I think going forward for a small trust, it does give us confidence that we're following similar patterns or exceeding to the national averages, which is good for us, especially with working with the councils and asking for their support to get back to where we were. So I think very useful.
Excellent, thanks. Who'd like to go next? Andy, do you want to go next?
Yes, I think platform was great. The huge positive for me is benchmarking against the national average. I did push you guys for a league table because I'm that way inclined, but I think rightfully you probably said no. And I probably wouldn't have done if we were below the average, so that's how that goes. But yeah, I think the only thing from analysis point of view, I think I tended to pull out a lot more that was PR. So the top 4 boxes that were NPS, cleanliness, confidence indicators were largely the only 4 figures I reported on. Anything below that, I wasn't getting too much insight other than, you know, males and females come in, this is the different types of people, but I've got other ways of doing that isn't a survey. So I didn't really get beyond that. And I think with the initial setup on the platform, there was some nice sort of guides came out, but I had a real trouble with the filters initially. So something around, I was definitely in June, but it was only letting me use the May filter or something like that. And I don't quite know. I think Phil, my IT guy, fed it back, but there was definitely something where I wasn't feeling like I was in the moment, if that makes sense. And there's a few people nodding. They might be able to explain it better than me. I was definitely felt like I was a month ahead of myself.
Just before I go on to Jane, who was nodding, Andy, do you know if Phil or anyone else in the organisation has used any of the participation or finance data for internal or external reporting?
I'm not too aware. Now, I think the problem with this is there's such a lot of data and there's only limited headspace in both our business and probably at the client end. I'm not sure whether it's too rich for people. So I only really see the customer reporting, but I haven't had, once we'd got the good news story out there, I didn't get almost any questions back to say, can you tell us more, or can we understand this more? In fact, I haven't had one question. That's from our contract managers. Presumably they're getting the questions from the clients. So once we'd sort of filtered out, how did you do nationally? I don't think we've got much more. And I think the stuff that's come out on LinkedIn and the papers is great PR, but I don't think it's customer insight. So there's obviously a big difference between those. Don't get me wrong, the PR is a great thing. Customer confidence and usage of centres is a brilliant news story, but I wasn't digging behind the customer experience too much more than that. So
no, I'm with you. Okay, Jane, do you want to follow on?
Well, from someone who had to sit there and do the filters, and I did use the idiot notes. I'm not 100% certain I've set it up right. Okay. And that's only because when I look at the data, I'm looking at it and thinking, is that right? So, you know, I'm looking at it and thinking, well, if it is right, I'll be happy as Larry. It just doesn't, so some of the data does not seem to match. So for instance, if I went and look at what we've input for average staff hours, what I got on the data for us doesn't match what's in the data in our finance stuff. I can't access either any of the customer experience. It just will not load.
Okay.
Doesn't matter how many times I go in, I cannot access it. So I can't, any of the survey stuff, I can't get anything back. So it may well be, and I know my local authorities, I spoke to them, I had a quarterly KPI meeting last week, asked them, you know, how they're doing. They said they can't access anything at all. So I said, oh, really? So whether that's because they haven't tried or whether there is an issue, I don't know. But yeah, so from my point of view, when I was looking at the filters, I was trying to do really quick and dirty. That sounds terrible, but I haven't got the time to sit there because I've got no IT person. I have to do it myself at the moment, and I haven't got any admin staff. I haven't got my secretary. Everyone's still on furlough, so I'm trying to do it all myself, and I'm not 100% convinced I've set the filter up right.
Okay.
Jane, can I ask you, are you using Internet Explorer?
Yeah,
you are, right.
Yeah,
I'll email you later. There is an issue with it using Internet Explorer as opposed to Chrome or Edge. Okay. But I'll email you the details after this and I'll explain it.
Okay.
Brilliant. Thanks a lot. Who haven't we had yet? David, have you gone in and used the platform produce reports at all?
We don't use it for producing reports, to be honest, because we've got our own comprehensive report suite. So, I mean, we're submitting you the data and, you know, we've already got that data because we're submitting it to you. So all our standard reports we're still doing. Yeah. The usefulness is being able to compare yourself with the national average. That's where the use is. But to be honest, that is the only use for us. I mean, because all the other data we've supplied you. So, I mean, we've got that data. We've got our standard reports set up and everything for that already. So the benefit, the advantage is just be able to look at the national average and that's it, I think, for us.
Brilliant. And you found it fairly user-friendly to use?
It's okay, but to be honest, I've not spent a lot of time using it, to be honest, if I'm
Okay.
really honest.
No, that's fine. Colin, anything to add?
No, I echo what David said. I mean, we've got quite a comprehensive kind of reporting, so we've already got the data. I did have a go, and the filters are a nightmare. I just cannot get my head around them. So, for example, one of the infographics you put out, I tried to match that against us nationally. I couldn't get the kind of everyone's results on the infographic to match, and I couldn't get our results to match. You know, and in the end, we had to go to Uku at Data Hub to kind of explain how to do it. So they're certainly not. I mean, you know, I had our IT guy have a look at it. I'm not, you know, and so it's not something that kind of jumps out in terms of being easy to use. But I would say, yeah, the benchmarking is the most useful stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, it's a little bit blunt in terms of it doesn't take into account, you know, catchment, size of centres, etc. Yeah. So it is a little bit of a blunt instrument.
Yes. Okay, that's fine. Richard, anything on the sort of using the dashboard and reporting?
I hope that's a better connection now.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
Thank you. Sorry about that. I have used it a little bit. Again, as everyone else, obviously the comparing to national data will be really useful. The filters are a little bit clunky, and you do have to. It feels like I have to push through and keep changing it to almost get what I wanted, which is a bit of the wrong way around, if that makes sense. The first visit you get and the first result, you think that doesn't work, that's not right. So, but yeah, with a bit of playing, we've generally found what we wanted.
Excellent, thanks. Who haven't I covered? Lisa?
Yeah, just going back really to what David was saying, with having the data already, I certainly haven't used it. Now, whether the people from finance and have used it or are also like having an input on the information, I can't comment on that, unfortunately. So I apologise for that. But the data that we're sending you is the data that, like they've said, is what I've already got. So I'm using that because it's already in my reporting.
Yeah.
So just pure laziness, really, I think, because it's already in. I've already got that set up. So I haven't particularly messed about with the platform, if I'm honest. So yeah. So apologies for that, but
no, that's fine.
Yeah,
that's fine. Sharon, I haven't asked you yet this session, have I?
Yeah, didn't I go first?
Oh, you did. Sorry. Sorry, I think that has anyone got any? So, I mean, the key takeaways I've got there are that the most valuable thing from the reporting is definitely the national benchmarks, and the key area that people have struggled with is the use of the filtering system. So we need to look at ways of making that a little bit easier, and perhaps doing some training sessions on the use of the filters. Anything anyone else would like to add to that? So, David.
Yeah. So, Mike, just to reiterate what I said earlier about the definitions of data and stuff, I think that's something that we definitely need to think about as an industry.
And have they not been covered off by 4Global in the data hub work that they did prior to moving communities, or are these additional areas?
Not necessarily. I think some of it is, I mean, 4Global have got their take on it. We've got our take on it. I'm sure other people have got their take on it as well. So attendance, for example, is just one. And attendance, you know, if somebody attends our leisure centre in a day, we would record that as once. Yeah. But in 4Global, they're recording it 3 or 4 times because they, you know, if they attend 2 GX and that sort of stuff, then that becomes a multiple number.
Yeah.
And so it's just, I mean, it's not necessarily saying that one is wrong or whatever. It's just that we just need to agree a definition and some terms and stuff around it. So when we say attendance, what do we mean by attendance? You know, I just, because that has just been confusing for our clients, and clients have been coming back and saying, but we send out monthly client reports already, and we tell clients what we're doing and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
And then that data is sort of like show attendance, and it's showing different to what's in 4Global, and so that, you know, they come back and querying it. Why is it different?
Yeah.
And it's not that it's wrong. It's just that it's different things. It's saying different things.
Yeah. No, I'm with you. That's great. Right, made a note of that. Okay. Anything else? Sorry, Jane. Yeah.
Just to sort of expand on what Dave's saying as well, depending on what client you've got and where you're reporting it, they want it in different formats. So obviously, again, you've got this dichotomy of, you know, we're saying for moving communities says this, and the local authority may look at that, and then I'm presenting my KPIs in that way, and I'm going to say, well, the reason the two don't match is because X, Y, Z. So it's a case of obviously being able to extrapolate, that's a good word, isn't it? Extrapolate what you're actually reporting on, so that the local authority or your client understands exactly what you're reporting, because obviously at the minute I find everybody wants it in different formats. My board have it in one format, you know, the client wants it in a different format. It's a bit of, it's like death by statistics at the minute.
Okay, well, that's great. All right then. So if no one's got anything else to add on that section, we've got about, oh, sorry, go on, Sharon.
Sorry, I'm just taking it from my view. I don't know if I've got it wrong. I sort of give our clients, our board and the rest of our team the same data. So we're all on for the KPIs, so we're all on the same information. So that sort of saves time. But how I sort of went around it was user data. So it wasn't visitors to centre. I still collect that. I don't report visitors to centre, but it's actually activities undertaken. So if somebody is coming in and going for a swim in a gym, then I would count it as user data, because those areas are being used by the customer, aren't they? So there are different areas that we're moving them around the buildings.
Yeah, I'm with you. Excellent. Okay. Right.
Hey, Mike, can I ask a question?
Yeah, sure.
Do you get any feel of how much the platform is being used, particularly by local authorities?
Yeah, we discussed this last week. There was some user figures, and don't quote me on that, although this has been recorded. Obviously, I'm sure it was up. It was around the 70-80% of, but I think that was a combination of local authorities and operators using it, and what I'd like to do is see the split there. I mean, I suspect that the operators are probably using this a little bit more than local authorities, and it would differ between local authorities if they were obviously in-house or contracted out, or a mixture of the two. So I think what, because Utku was talking about this, I think it was that a lot of people had used it, but not many people were using it very often, or not as many people as we'd like. And I guess that's what the next section we need to start quite nicely into, because it's about, you know, how can we make this more valuable going forward? Is there anything that is missing that we should be doing? Is there anything that we need to change in terms of the dashboard, the way we report out to the sector? We've got some industry workshops planned, so I think the first one will probably take place in September now. So there'll be a September and then another one where we'll be focusing on different parts of moving communities and doing a sector-wide online industry workshop. We've got the infographics and the insights coming out every week, every 2 weeks. So thoughts about how we can make it more useful? Is there anything that's missing, anything that needs to be significantly changed? Because ultimately, you know, we want to make sure that there's a reason. One of the people, there's a few people here that I've dealt with in terms of MBS in the past, and it's always been, how can we make MBS actually, you know, valuable, not something that you just need to do because it's a tick in the box in the contract. And I guess that's where, you know, we in Sport England definitely want to get moving communities, so that it's something that if it did ever stop, you would miss it. So thoughts on that, anyone, to kick off with?
I've got a thought, but it's gone.
Oh, sorry, do you want to go first, David, and then I'll go to Jane?
Well, mine's a slightly different subject, but mine's about access, really, because I had issues with things like general managers, where a general manager has got access to more than one site, but we didn't want necessarily to give them access to the contract as a whole.
Yeah.
So I think it needs to be a bit more flexible, the level of access that you can give people, I think.
Yeah,
And
that's definitely certainly an operator thing at our end. We ended up, and it did get ironed out at some point, but we had a general manager that looked after 3 sites, and it was suggested that they, let's say their name was Andy Glover, that they would have an email address called Andy Glover 1, Andy Glover 2, Andy Glover 3. Now you can't reset a password on that, and obviously our data guys say, you know, inventing a password that looks like a BFB email address is very bad practice. So that was one. And on the same topic, we obviously use feedback focus. You would imagine that having access to one would give you access to the other, but they're not necessarily always lined up. And we had a contract manager who obviously looks after 4 sites up north, who wanted access to one site on feedback focus. And again, it was suggested we were given an email address called alfretonmanager@pfpleisure.org. Now that just doesn't cut it in, for his day job, his username has to be his work email address. So on 2 occasions, we've been asked to give our own teams email addresses that aren't legitimate email addresses, just to get around the system, where obviously it should be the other way around. So I think absolutely concur with David on that. There weren't too many of them, but we do live in a technological world where most of that stuff is solvable.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's around flexibility of access.
And I think being able to give access to our people within, it is just for the larger operators, I suppose, that got this issue. But for us to be able to just give that access rather than having to come to Alison or Chris at 4 Global or something to request that access, would make more sense if we were able to just give that access.
Yeah. Okay. Jane, you had your hand up.
Sorry, I was going to ask a question. Because obviously we talked about, you mentioned about local authorities, or someone asked a question about how much they've been accessing. I wanted to know what actually Sport England, how valuable Sport England is seen as a tool at the moment, because obviously the whole reason it was set up, how I understood it, was to help lobby, lever and try and lobby for some more pennies.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons in terms of future funding for the sector. And obviously the other one from a Sport England point of view is using it as a tool to inform their own future strategic investments. So, obviously it's a bit difficult for me to talk about it because we're managing the contract, but they seem pretty pleased with how it's going. And I think what's certainly fair to say is that it's gone right up to the top of Sport England, and they are firmly behind it. And it's going to inform Grant Thornton. You're obviously aware we're managing the NRF, so Grant Thornton will be relying heavily on the information from moving communities to do the feedback report that they need to do back to government in terms of how the money's being used. So yeah, it's probably more of a strategic question for Sport England to answer. But the feedback that we've had is that they think that obviously it's had its teething problems, but the aim of it is something that is definitely good for them, good for the sector, and good for their relationships and the discussions with wider government.
I think the flip side of that is what would have happened if there'd been a bad news story. So it was generally good news, but if it was bad news, being on the back foot of that or trying to tell your version of that could have been very tricky, because the information is out there, and back to being the back end of the story. It's how we could have all collaborated. So, we saw some great news around customers wanting to return, about the role of a leisure centre and what have you. But you're rolling the dice there that if that was a bad news story, there are people looking at that and making some quite big decisions, big decisions for the future of both our sector and our businesses. So it's great. It was good news. And I think we were probably all sitting on a good news story because of the reaction of the sector. But there is a risk there that it doesn't always spit out the good news you're looking for.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. So let's just follow up on that then. To widen it up, if there aren't any particular elements that you think are missing, what do you all think about moving communities being an ongoing service and being valuable to the sector as a whole and to yourselves? What would you say about that?
I can pick one up actually, just to go back to the missing. The thing I'm missing in the data is kids. So probably one of our biggest USPs of our business, and I'm sure everyone else, is swim lessons. But is anything to do with junior gym, we are far more available and accessible for kids. And in the reports, and I think this is more perhaps how the surveys are built, but I'm just not seeing we teach 80,000, 90,000 kids a year to swim. Yeah. I'm just not seeing them. Yeah. And that is, for our clients and for government, that has to be a big thing, because I don't think some of our competitors are in that space. And probably because we were surveying the parents and it was a bit woolly. Are you talking about your kid? Are you talking about you? The parent being surveyed, there's every chance they've never set foot in our building they might be a spectator, but there's every chance they weren't active. So I'm really missing them from certainly any of the infographics, and it's such a huge thing for what we do for the country and obviously PR. So that was my bigger mission. So
yeah, no, that's a great point. Okay, anyone else in terms of looking forward, the value of otherwise of moving communities? Lisa, I can't see you, so I'm going to ask you verbally.
For me, going forward, again, just reiterating what Andy's just said, really, yeah, we pointed out that the children with the obesity and kids being such a massive issue at the minute, we need to be able to prove that this section is trying to do something. And as a council, that we're trying, you know, we're inputting on that pressure on our sort of contracts to say this is a big area that you need to do, and they are fulfilling that area and exceeding it. Places leisure, you know, they really are. But again, that it's not there. It is missing, and that has been noted from us. So going forward, we need a means, and I don't know how you do that. I don't know how you ask the kids, because it's almost that you've got to ask the kids,
Which
not
is
the parents.
Yeah, which is difficult.
Bit. Yeah, but I'll leave that bit with you, Mike.
But I think on there you can ask, you know, it goes back to the survey. If you did a separate survey for lessons, and I imagine everyone else is probably in the same boat we are, we know when we send out a survey, are we sending it to a parent or are we sending it to a member or a visitor or what have you? So you can build a survey, but I'd quite like to have dug under the fact that we do a good job now. I've got a 1-year-old, and more I think, hang on a sec, he's not going to get as much sport at school now. Yeah. That is a different question, but it's quite a good question to ask the parent that says, hang on a sec, you know, the leisure operators are doing a good job. You have your swim lesson, you have your gymnastics lesson, you've got your junior gym, but a lot of these kids are probably still getting 1 hour a week at school. So if we wanted to use it for the power of the movement and the broader challenges of kids' activity, that is quite a good one, because yeah, my little laddie's probably got people queuing up to fill him full of sugar and Coca-Cola, but I don't think there's a lot of people queuing up to get him active at school or in his free time, unless you know he comes into one of our centres. So yeah, that the voice of the parent in there would be really nice and something different, I think, because I don't necessarily see that elsewhere in the sector, but it's a big ask from us, you know, if it is going to government.
I think the other aspect is we are all probably hosts when you've got swimming pools of large swim clubs, all of whom also, you know, serve a big need for the community, but they are also missing. Yes, you're reporting on their throughput data, well, we do, because obviously we're, you know, we do club thing, but actually you're not actually using any of that data in relation to, you know, what clubs do. And, you know, while some gymnastics clubs may have their own venue, most swim clubs are not going to be able to afford to have their own venue. They're all using, aren't they, local authority? Yeah. I'm sure all of us around here, we've got swimming pools, I've got swim clubs, I've got about 6. So yeah, I'm just using clubs as an example. You know, you've got a lot of clubs that are also being missed that you know, do a very valuable job with children, adults, be what it is, and they're not really being, you know, that's not really coming through on this either.
Okay. All right, just I'm going to wrap up in a few minutes. Keep to time. Anything else? Who hasn't? Colin, David, on the future of moving communities. What you think will be valuable? What would be less valuable for you carrying on going forwards? Go on, David. You go first.
I don't know, to be honest. I mean, as I said, the value for us is the being able to compare ourselves with the industry, and know what the industry is doing generally. I think I'm not sure about anything else, if I'm honest. No. I don't. The other parts of the business might have a different view on it. I think there's certainly the survey, but that's the next section, isn't it? It's got some use, I think, but you know, like everybody else, we do our own surveys and things, so we know what we're doing. But again, you get that comparison with other people, don't you? If you do a national survey.
Yeah, definitely. And I guess the other thing I would add is that it is quite important to get the picture of the sector as a whole, both for the sector, but also for, you know, external partners, government, LGA, all of these other external partners have come heavily on board and are finding some value in it. So I guess that's Sport England's role, isn't it, to try and look at it from a sector point of view, not just as individual operators.
Yeah, and I accept that. I think that's possible.
Colin, anything else to add?
No, I certainly understand where you're coming from there, Mike. I think it's difficult because I mean, much like probably Andy and David, we do our own surveys. We have our own reporting, which we already provide back to the client. This is almost like another layer.
Yeah.
And it particularly gets confusing and complicated if the definitions don't match. So they're saying, why doesn't that match with that? And even when you do benchmarking, because of, you know, what I said earlier, I think it's sometimes a little bit blunt. You know, they straight away jump into it, say, why aren't you doing as well as this, or why are you doing better than this, when it's not actually necessarily comparing apples and apples.
Yeah.
But generally, you know, I think it's a good thing. I guess it's just we already do it all at the moment because of the contract requirements, and it's how does it get reconciled?
Yeah,
with those requirements without adding anything else.
Yeah, I guess one thing for us to think about, or both sides to think about, is how we can avoid too much duplication. So it is the ways in which we can change and adapt moving communities. So it's stuff that you would have done anyway, as opposed to additional stuff.
Yeah, and particularly with clients, you know, we provide the information and then we kind of have our kind of monthly, quarterly, annual meetings, and then we go through what we provided. Sometimes, I mean, it depends on clients. Some sort of clients love this kind of stuff, and some kind of just want, you know, you to explain it and sort of go through it, and that's where sort of what we normally do in terms of our reporting and the like.
Yeah.
And I think the other thing, particularly with the surveys, I mean, perhaps there's a danger of sort of the customers getting emailed twice for surveys.
Yeah.
So we're obviously trying to avoid that.
Yeah.
But as we kind of get more and more up and running, we'll be starting to send surveys out, and it's just making sure, I guess, they don't conflict and sort of customers don't feel overburdened by surveys.
Yeah, definitely. Okay.
Yeah. I think frequency probably is, obviously there's talk of another twice a year is for me the maximum for our workload at our end. So obviously we subcontract out our surveys, but the work to make sure, as Colin says, you don't send it to one and another. We're very strict on that, and our data guys don't sort of say, Andy, you've got a choice. They're like, these are the rules. If you can't work to them, you don't send it. So we got to a point because of the email about surveys. We didn't quite turn our internal survey off, but we were pretty close to having to do that for 3 weeks, which is kind of and the reality of it is our internal survey gets a better response rate, and that's probably because it's from us. It's asking questions about us. That's not a criticism of moving communities, but when you deal with our brand versus 3 brands you've never heard of, that will always resonate with them. So that was delicate, but I think once a year, definitely I'd be all in favor. Twice a year is a push, but if it went to sort of quarterly, I think, some of our, we all run quite lean teams, and they're all, our marketing guys send this email. Well, they've got a ton of emails and social media posts and all the other stuff to do. Any more than twice a year is probably where you'd get some pushback. Obviously, everyone's got different resources, but I can't see anyone putting their hands up for 4 times a year or 3 times a year. But I don't think that's been.
I don't think that. No,
anyway. So, yeah,
not envisaged at all. And obviously, there may well be a difference between what happens this year, what happens, next year or the year after or whatever. Okay, folks, I'm sorry if people. We've run out of time a little bit. I want to, because I've got some new people coming into that 3 o'clock one. Who's going to be joining us? Are you okay to join us? It won't be as long, the next one, Andy, I don't think, if you're happy to join us for the survey one.
Yeah, I'm happy. Yeah, surveys is more my expertise. I'm sort of semi-fill on this one, which is never good.
Anyone else joining us for 3 o'clock from here? I can't remember. Excellent. All right. Well, the 3 o'clock may not last as long because it will be focusing specifically on lessons that we can learn from the first survey. So, I hope you've felt that was valuable. I really appreciate your time. I know it's a busy time for everyone, and we're spending too much time on Zoom as well. So I've just added to your worries for that, but really appreciate it. So there'll be a report that's generated out of this. And there'll definitely be a feedback from the survey and what we've got from these 2 focus groups, which we'll be putting back to the sector as well. So thanks a lot for your input, everyone. And nice to meet those people I haven't met before.
Thank you very much. Speak to you
Cheers now.
soon.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.